interesting. And so what could be going on here is that these Triple Crown horses do not perform, that the rigors of that will take its toll ultimately in the Travers. This year it feels like it's a little less likely to happen because the horses that have been stars on this whole interplanetary magic carpet ride that's been headed by Justify seemingly, at least ran to somewhat their form here. I do think that Tenfold, I've said before that I'm not so sure, and I've said this for many weeks, if a lot of these horses are as tailor-made to get the mile and a quarter as a lot of people would think. I think, is like I said, I'm not going to get completely caught up in Vino Rosso making up the ground that he did. It was at a mile and an eighth. He was fortunate in this field to be able to not only make up the ground, but get a piece of the check, to get a piece by finishing third. In the Travers, in a bigger field, and the possibility, there's a good chance somebody's going to be ready to run a really good race. You might not be so fortunate when not being engaged or having a problem with the racetrack or whatever issue was going on with Vino Rosso that day. So he's going to have to, number one, be able to make a decisive move and be able to finish strongly at 10 furlongs. And everybody believes with that Curlin pedigree he can do that. But it's interesting that he's the Curlin that can't go a mile and a quarter. He's the Curlin that couldn't go a mile and a half, yet he finished ahead of Tenfold at the 12 furlongs. What was Tenfold's excuse? And there have been a myriad of them. For whatever reason, the press, there are certain press corps that like Tenfold a little bit more. And I don't know whether it's maybe they like Steve Asmussen more than Todd Pletcher, because I don't see any, these are distinctions without much difference. I don't see much difference between these two horses. So with that, that's code word for there are doubts on or clouds hanging above both of these horses, and particularly with Tenfold bolting out in the stretch the way he did. It reminded people a lot of what Sporting Chance, who was in this Jim Dandy field, who ran poorly, by the way. Once again, he's probably going to have to cut back in distance for Wayne Lucas. It reminded people of that. He didn't quite bolt out as sharply as Sporting Chance did, but this was something that is certainly in the disturbing category, and it's enough of a disturbing potential disaster that you have to be concerned about that. So that's an issue right there. The running time, once again, 150.49 for the Jim Dandy. Again, I don't think Tenfold or Vino Rosso are going to get enough support to be the favorite, but there will be some money taken in. I like Vino Rosso to be a grinder. I actually think that versus the excuse that everyone gave that Tenfold, who finished behind him in fifth in the Belmont, because he didn't get the right trip, which I think is really an overstep. Even if you look at that tape, at 12 furlongs, even if you can't get your act together, or if things don't unfold ideally in the first furlong and a half, you've got 10 and a half furlongs to get your strategy straight. So, there really aren't as many excuses on a racetrack with the width and the configuration that Belmont Park has. And so, traffic issues are a little bit less prevalent at 12 furlongs in a race with that kind of, on a racetrack with the width of Belmont at that distance versus the Kentucky Derby, a 20-horse cavalry charge like the Derby. So that's the difference. And I think that it's pretty clear that Tenfold had every opportunity to make a run at Justify. And he just ran evenly the whole way, never really threatened, really made a move. At least Vino Rosso tried to make a move on the turn. So for people to say that he didn't get the mile and a half is an overstep, because it wasn't for lack of trying. He engaged Justify, but Justify, breathed that ungodly Godzilla-like fire on him and incinerated and roasted both John Velasquez and horse. And that was the end of him. But the interesting thing was, like I said before, that right in the minutes after Justify secured the Triple Crown, that one thing about Vino Rosso, he ran hard. He came back, he re-engaged, he tried to, get back in the race, couldn't outrun Justify, but battled as hard as he could with Gronkowski, who had that great run, and Hofberg, who only slightly outran him. He ran a very, very good race, the kind of race that if we had more 12 furlong races carded in North America, Vino Rosso would be a prime candidate to get a second chance and a prime candidate to improve upon that. Now, we'll never know that unless he starts to run in turf events, because as we all know, as Wayne Lucas said, people don't even care about mile and a half horses anymore. So it's a dying format. The Belmont is usually the one and only time a horse gets to run that far. Vino Rosso showed more interest to run that far than Tenfold did. Yet people just said that he couldn't get the mile and a half. And yet Tenfold finished behind him. As I said, I don't believe in that the trip was what cost him. I really think Tenfold is the one that is going to struggle if they both struggle, they struggle. But something tells me that Tenfold may not be able to get 10 furlongs. I just don't think that he is as good a candidate to get it running the way that he did in the Jim Dandy. I think if there's some pace in there, even if it's a little bit moderate to soft, he needs to sit back. I think that, the horse that we're getting ready, which leads us to the horse that we're getting ready to talk about, who is more capable and of doing those kind of things tactically, and that's Good Magic. Good Magic, the winner of the Haskell today on podcast afternoon, and he was very convincing in this